All right, so welcome to the first gathering of 22 TW1. I can't believe I even know what term it is. English 510 and people invited from the Slack channel that I keep with all the alumni. This is a generative writing workshop and it's supposed to be very creative, but I always kick them off with a little bit of talking about the class that we're currently doing. And then, the learning module, and then we'll talk a bit about the one upcoming, and then I'll tell how the process works for today. So we're just finishing up you picking your classic and contemporary texts to compare and use throughout the course. I want to highlight again that they should be of the same genre, and so fiction or nonfiction. And if they're highly subgenre specific, like a detective mystery or a romance or something like that, you should pick the same subgenre as well. And that genre or subgenre should match what you're writing. So for this class, and I realize a bunch of people in this class are trying to do screenplays, trying to do poetry, and another team lead and I, Amy Meyer, who's amazing, and I wish you had her for this class because she's so good. We worked with the dean to help improve this class, but it still just isn't very friendly to much else but prose. And you'll see as we move through the class why I made that advice. And so I'm sorry if you don't get it right in the and you can choose it. It's just going to be hard to score well. And I am entirely bound by the rubric, which is something that I know Joan experienced in history, which is tough, but I've got to grade you by the rubric. And so, when we're having a rubric that's working on dialogue and there's no dialogue in any of the poetry or narrative arc, and one of the defining characteristics of the genre poetry is it doesn't tend to have a narrative arc, then what do? Right? So that's the reason I advise towards prose for this class. And I just want to point out that the skills in prose, particularly figurative language, they work in all the places. And because there's dialogue and prose, that'll work in screenwriting. So just, think of the ways you can apply it to your work that you're passionate about. And then I know also, and I'm sorry to keep referring to you, Joe. It's also a great way to learn what the boxes are in anything, right? Because there's boxes to trying to get published, there's boxes to everything. And you're like, here's the box, then how can I learn within the box while being more than the box, right? And so you get to understand what kind of parameters big whatever puts on you, big agent, big publishing, big SNHU, and then how do you get the most out of it and go beyond it and be your own creative person. I had a really great rejection, I don't know, about a week ago from an agent. She read my stuff. I'm querying my memoir right now, and she was like, "But these four things," and I said, "Well, these are the four things that are the reason I'm worried my memoir is not going to get published." So it was very heartbreaking and great because she'd read everything and confirmed all my fears. All to say that the boxes exist and we just have to know about them and work around them. And my book proposal kind of argues against them. And she saw right through all my arguments, which was great. This is why I feel like I'm a good person to be working with you all because, I'm experiencing everything at the same time that you are. Really quick, do you have any questions before I talk about the learning module? And today might go a little longer than normal. I try to hold it at an hour and a half, but we're just getting to know each other.
I'll probably have to leave in about half an hour though, but I'll
Yeah,
stay until then.
great. And I'll get a writing prompt going very soon. So you'll get at least one out of it. We usually do two. Questions yet? Okay, so I talked about the two texts. The other thing I wanted to talk about is I know we're going to be dealing in theme very soon. And theme sounds like something like, say, love, right? But if you are trying to identify a theme in your chosen texts, if you're up to one word, you've started the theme, but it needs to be a sentence. And what you're identifying is how the author is interpreting the theme. For example, love could become family love triumphs over all, or, romantic love is a myth, or uh, love of animals exceeds love of humans any day, right? Whatever it is, you see where I'm saying that the word love suddenly becomes more complex. Say your theme is love is the easy one. What's another theme in literature?
Coming of age.
Coming of age. Thank you. That's
Mm-hmm.
a great one. So when you say the theme in this work is coming of age, well, I mean, we all come of age and none of us do it the same way. So what does it mean to come of age in that novel? Is it coming of age to have a loss of innocence? Is it coming of age to, I'm thinking of Cassie here, Sarah, leave horror behind and take control of their own life, right? Sarah's character is in a foster system and she has a rough foster experience, and coming of age for her means actually getting to take control of her own life and not have the system throwing her around. Hopefully, I don't know because I haven't read that part of Cassie's life yet. So yeah, there's all kinds of themes in literature, and the most important thing I can stress here is that it's not one word; it's the way the author is using the one word. He's up. So please keep that in mind when you're working in this class, and particularly the kind of fun thing, because I didn't figure out the theme of my memoir until well after the whole thing was written. Kind of knew some stuff that was going on, but I ended up realizing that there's this strong theme of imposter syndrome moving through the whole thing. That through my whole military career and trying to be a teacher at the Air Force Academy, but also a public affairs officer, I felt like I never quite became an expert until my last time at the Air Force Academy after my PhD, when I really had enough training and enough education, like training in the military, education and academics, to feel confident in what I was doing. And that's when I was like, I must retire. I've reached my pinnacle or whatever. And I figured out that I'm in charge of my own happiness. But all of that took me a 26-year career to do. So imposter syndrome, the subtitle would be, if they call my memoir Bluff, which I'm trying to do, which in the military means bottom line up front. I'm calling it that, and then it's catching and curing imposter syndrome. And so it's not just imposter syndrome, but what it means to go through life with imposter syndrome and to sort of set it aside as I exit the military. Some people take longer to learn than others. That's what should be my other subtitle, right? So does that help with themes to kind of expand that it's never just one word, but it often starts with one word?
Yes, I have a question. One of the things that it's asking for is, like, when we're talking about literary conventions, it's asking for, like, what is it that the audience is looking for? For me, it's kind of a tricky question because I know what I might be looking for, but I don't really know what the general public is looking for.
Yeah.
So I'm not really clear on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Joan. So with literary conventions, all that I think the course designers mean by asking you what the audience is looking for is they want you to identify what are the expected conventions in that genre. And for, say, romance, it says this in the rubric, but so romance is looking for a happily ever after. In a detective novel, the mystery must be solved, right? And so they say the audience is looking for that. And that's just like, so I just started reading the 4th Robert Galbraith detective series, and that's J.K. Rowling's Cormoran Strike detective series thing. And I'm expecting there to be romantic tension between him and Robin, but there will be a couple of false trails she's going to send us down, a brief hope that all this weird stuff on the side might solve the big mystery that's happening, and then they're going to solve the big mystery. Those are the conventions of this detective novel that I'm reading, and I'm enjoying checking off the box as they happen. So I think that the course designers are asking you to identify what especially subgenres expectations are, and why people continually choose those is because they enjoy the conventions and they want to experience them as they happen. If you're talking nonfiction, people are expecting you to be truthful. They understand there's this complicated thing where you're creating a character. I mean, writing only works when you're using the conventions of fiction to write nonfiction. So, when I write myself in this memoir, it's still a character of myself. I couldn't possibly get all of me in there. So you should have like a compelling character still, but it should be truthfully told, and the contents of it should go to what I call story truth, meaning that you're creating an emotional truth. And this is what Tim O'Brien from The Things They Carried, he actually talks about this and how to write a true war story, which is one of the chapters in that novel. We read from him several times in SNHU. I know in 529 you'll read from him. And in it, not in 529, but in this, he talks about story truth versus happening truth. And that's the reason The Things They Carried is presented to you as a novel, because I mean, so much of the stuff is the same that you literally can find the event with Kurt Lemon in the tree, like Kurt Lemon picking body parts out of a tree. His name, shockingly, is Kurt Lemon because you can find it in the records from Vietnam. It's that accurate. But O'Brien then makes things up in between because he doesn't feel like what exactly happened can express how emotionally awful it was. So that's a long way to say there's conventions. We expect even in nonfiction that you're going to grow to a universal truth, a theme that's more than one word, and you have to do that truthfully. And if you can't, you do what Tim O'Brien did and write a novel instead. That was long.
Yeah, thank you for that. It helps a lot because, you know, for me, it's always, I don't know, it's hard for me to suppose like my thoughts on what, and I think even when I think about something like marketing, you know, it's like trying to market something, then it's like, okay, what does the public want where it's marketable to the public? And I think that's always kind of a tricky question. I don't feel like I have expertise in that.
Sure, and I really think that, especially if you're thinking of doing nonfiction writing, it's got to be a compelling character, a great narrative arc, and something that is worth reading. And those are all fictional elements. I mean, the compelling character and the great plot are part of fiction too, and that's why they call it creative nonfiction, because you have to really consciously put it together in a way that your audience wants to. Okay, so what we do now, and this is what's fun about this, and this is the whole point of all these weekends. We won't spend so long introducing and talking about class as much next time, unless we need to with class. But here we're going to do a little bit of pressure writing. And what I do is I'm going to give you a prompt and I'm going to give you a 6-minute timer. And you're just going to write what comes to you, even if it doesn't match what I did with a prompt. The rule is to write. And your brain's going to be like, oh no, because I'm putting a lot of pressure on you. You're going to panic or whatever. So if your brain is really cruel to you, then you need to just start writing down. And ideally you write by hand, but you don't have to. But when you write by hand in this beginning phases, it engages both sides of your brain. But if you don't, you can type. I mostly compose on my keyboard, but I do often will start something when I have a really creative idea I need to do by hand just to sort of engage that to start with. But up to you. So in this writing, if your brain gives up on you immediately, just start writing, I don't know what to write, or something equally short but repetitive over and over again and pretty fast. Give it like 30 seconds. Your brain will probably say, okay, fine, I'll give you something. This is boring. So do something to bore your brain if you don't have something that comes right away. And so when I say this can be, if you're writing nonfiction, typically it's about yourself. Otherwise, I will say you or your character is the way I describe these. So get in mind, you know, Sarah might think about Cassie. I know she's working on her, or she can write about herself. Doesn't matter. I mean, all that matters is that writing happens. But if you do have a character in mind, maybe start to float that one up. If you're still figuring out what you're writing about, often this will be, you'll write something about yourself. And that's totally fine because, I mean, a ton of my own fiction writing is based on, you know, like a germ of some experience I've had, and then I fictionalize it. Where would it go if it wasn't going this way? Or if I put it in a different setting? Or if I turn this character into somebody different than me, what would happen? So it's okay to write about yourself now. And you also don't have to read what you wrote. We tend to read back what we wrote just because it's really amazing to hear the kind of creativity that can happen in 6 minutes. It's remarkable. So keep in mind that we'll ask if you want to read it back, but there's, you know, no pressure to do that if you don't feel comfortable. And so in this first one, so I have all these prompts that I do for the first time, but I knew Sarah was going to be here and I'm going to do a different one. And interestingly, I think it very much applies to Cassie, but I've had this prompt long before I knew about Sarah and Cassie. So I will copy the prompt and put it in the chat right now so you can read along with me. Okay, there in the chat. What I'm going to ask you to do is to write about a time when you chose to push against you or your character, chose to push against despair and bleakness. How did things like love, humor, hope persist despite dire circumstances? And obviously this prompt is asking you to push both a dark idea and then to lightness from it. And so if you pay attention to the way that the course directors write these courses or I offer prompts, we're trying to push for something to happen in between it. And what I love is the unspoken push might not do what I think it's going to do, but it usually will cause something really creative to come out. So again, write about a time when you or your character chose to push against despair and bleakness. So think of a moment of despair and bleakness for you or your character. How did love, humor, hope, any of these types of happy things persist despite dire circumstances? And I'm going to put 6 minutes on my timer. And then you can mute, you can turn off your video if you feel like you need to, you can leave it on, whatever. But basically, I just say on your marks, get set, right. We have about a minute left. Okay, time's up. Please start wrapping things up.
No.
I know it's fast. It's really fast.
See, where did it go?
I only got through the despair and sorrow part. I haven't gotten to the hope part yet.
That's okay. You'll have somewhere to go to when this is over.
Like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, this is really fast, but hopefully the pressure of writing fast really sparks your imagination. So if you only got to a certain place, put down a couple more notes to know where to go, because we're going to go in a different direction with the next prompt. So if you have ideas of where you want to go, throw down a couple words so you don't forget. And hopefully, I don't know, Katie, because you have to go pretty soon. I wonder if you might be interested or willing to go earlier first. Because we'd love to hear what you got, but I don't want to lose out on the chance because you're going to have to go.
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, I could probably stay another few minutes. Just whenever my family gets back home is when I'll have to go.
Fair.
So, but yeah, if that's okay, I can go
Yeah,
first.
great.
Okay. So yeah, I chose my character that I have in my story. And this is probably not actually going to be a scene, but yeah, it's just following the prompt. So do I just start reading?
Yeah, just start reading.
Okay, so the main character, her name is Tyra. Don't guess that doesn't really matter, but she's thinking. Raju sips her coffee, staring at the overgrown peppermint plant she'll tend to after breakfast. My empty cup rests on the ground by my feet, the strong aftertaste of toasted corn permeating from the back of my throat, my mother's favorite drink. The image of her frantic eyes comes back to me. She's clawing at the guards who ripped her own son from her arms. This is why I'm here, I remind myself. My mother has no idea her baby is still alive, and she's lost us both, but it's temporary. In just over a year, I'll have won Raju's trust and that of the community. He won't be dependent on a mother's milk anymore. We'll be home, and that's as far as I got.
Interesting. Okay,
That was
so
probably very confusing without context.
but I have lots of ideas, and I bet everybody else does too. I noticed that Sarah added into the prompt, and this is, I mean, not the prompt, the chat. This is something you can do if something hits you.
Oh, cool.
She really liked the permeating from the back of my throat, right, Sarah?
Thanks,
you want to say anything
Sarah.
else? And I was
I
really
want to know more.
Yeah, because it's toasted corn, so I suspect this is in a world I don't know. But anybody else? And Kay, you're muted if you're talking. But okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll pop through the kinds of things that I noticed with Katie's, and it'll give you some ideas that you can comment on for other people's work. And so immediately, wow on setting, right? Because you gave us a sense that they're sitting. It seems to be morningish because she hadn't started working on the overgrown peppermint. They have warm drinks in their hand. Tyra's is by her feet because you let us know that the first person narrator was going to be Tyra. Raju seems to be Tyra's mother, and fascinatingly, plot point, the mother has lost both of them, but Tyra's right there. So the mother must not know that Tyra's her daughter, and she's lost her son but didn't know. And we're in a different world, I think, because toasted corn is not a drink that I know of anywhere. I was just trying to think of any culture I've heard of a toasted corn drink, but I want it because I'm addicted to popcorn. So now I want to know what this is. But the Tyra's old enough to be somebody who could do something like this. But the son is really young because he seems to be on, say, a wet nurse. He's been stolen, but he's somewhere where he needs, as soon as he can be weaned, she's going to do something about this. Am I
Mhm.
close?
Yeah, pretty close. I obviously didn't clarify it in the writing, so there's no way to tell, but Raju is not the mother.
Oh,
Raju is the person who she needs, like she needs Raju's trust in order to be able to take her brother back to her mother, where she
gotcha.
is.
Gotcha. And the sensory detail about toasted corn is great. I immediately threw in like terracotta tiles, and I had a sort of a balcony with a, this doesn't have to be right. I'm just describing what happened to me.
Mhm.
A balcony with like planters that had the peppermint in them because heavens knows my spearmint's going crazy out in the garden where I didn't think it'd really survive, and I was very wrong. So all of these happened with me, and it just gives me a chance to mention how you really need to count on anytime you write, your reader is going to be filling in details, whether you put them there or not. And that's part of the fun part of the creative process between an author and readers, but also frustrating because there probably aren't terracotta tiles. So you have to decide
Mhm.
what your readers have to know about your setting, about your sensory detail, about your characters, and then you have to resign yourself to the fact that your reader is going to fill in, and that's both amazing and sometimes troublesome.
That's a really good tip for me. I know that I am super guilty of like floating head syndrome, white room syndrome. I'm just now starting to really practice using details so that my reader can imagine where my characters are. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a good tip for me to like remember that the reader fills it in if I don't give it to them.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, every time I listen to this Robert Galbraith slash J.K. Rowling detective series, it's very literal when she's doing it, and yet it's wonderful. And so she's such a great craft reminder for me because she's not subtle about it. There's a character sitting on a couch with a dachshund, and when she gets up to go make tea, she has to work her way around the dachshund. And so I love the way she reminds us of that she makes a setting, and then it's raining, and suddenly the rain's hitting
Hmm.
the windows. So, she will keep you grounded in her settings in a wonderful way. And she's a great list maker. So the items that might be on somebody's desk, and they're all things you have to pay attention to because it's a detective series and maybe a clue is in that list, right?
Right.
Yeah. So good. Well, you got us well on the way with setting. You have compelling characters. There's definitely a plot point in there where we're all like, "Ooh, what's going on?" So if I were grading in 529, it goes narrative arc. We know we are in the rising action of a narrative arc, definitely. The character is compelling because she's trying to help out a mother, and there's this age difference, and what is the big, huge story that goes behind all of that? You have sensory detail for setting. You have some physical setting, but that's the one thing that you could have probably done a little more on. Not more on, but more about. And then the last, figurative language. And we don't know yet. Maybe there's some symbolic meaning behind out of control peppermint. We don't really know for sure yet. Maybe toasted corn, but we have things waiting for us to continue to watch and see if they'll fill in as maybe a metaphor or simile, or maybe there's irony or foreshadowing. Maybe peppermint or toasted corn means something. Often a
Hmm.
sensory detail will be leading to or be figurative language. So, what a
Mm.
great start. So that's some of
Good.
the things
Thank
that
you.
we would talk about. And in 510, these are a little bit broader, but if you look at the elements that are suggested in your final project, you're going to pick two of them to say that you use in your toolkit as a writer that you like. Those are the areas to be looking in. Things like narrative arc, character, the physical setting, sensory detail, figurative language. You should be choosing it. Just trust me. That's an part of writing that has to be there, whether it's nonfiction, fiction, poetry, screenwriting. You have to be doing more with your words than just their literal meaning on the page. And then finally, the last thing you get grade on in all your classes will be how well you format that for me. I always get the comment, every term that all I care about is MLA format. And I promise you, while that's not true, I will comment on it if you get it wrong.
She can get way harder on you if she wanted to.
I could be. Do you have instructors that are harder on you?
I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I'm on the
I mean,
fence.
and a lot of times, I'll I will score proficient a lot, but really it's not proficient. But I just don't care enough about MLA format to score you not proficient on it. I just will say improve on these things, please.
I personally do appreciate comments about MLA format because I haven't used it in years. Almost my entire bachelor's, it was just pure APA.
Yeah.
So it's very unfamiliar to me, and I'm still trying to figure it out, I'd say.
And I think I looked through my announcements and I believe I haven't posted the one that's the differences between MLA and APA. I haven't, have I? Yeah, so I need to throw that up for you all because there's I got it from another instructor who said I could have it. And it's here's some things you should pay attention to that are different. So I'll grab
Paragraph
that would be
separation.
helpful.
Yeah, I'll do that before I drive 7 hours today. But I'm going to put a big note right here. Okay. Who would like to go next? Thank you so much, Katie. That was a really bold start.
Thanks for the feedback.
I'll go.
Thanks, Sarah.
If God's love is anything like yours, I don't want to have anything to do with him, Cassie yelled at her mom as she stomped up the stairs. She just listened to her mom yell for 4.5 hours after they visited with Darcy and Vinny. Darcy had warned her mother that if she didn't change what she was doing, she was going to lose Cassie. The pain in her gut overwhelmed her as she felt her mom's fear and despair mingled with her own desperation to get out. The next morning, Cassie came down, not sure what state she'd find her mom in. Would she even find her alive? Cassie never knew if one day she'd walk in and find her mother covered in her own slick, sticky blood. Fresh coffee and cigarettes mingled in the air, a familiar and fairly safe smell. Every step that Cassie took felt like she was walking through quicksand. Her thoughts were clouded and dull. She knew just one thing: she needed to leave, to get out forever. It was 6:15 in the morning. It was safe to assume her mom was only on her first cup of coffee, which meant she wasn't truly awake yet. Very quietly, Cassie slipped out the front door. Last week, the school social worker had given her a business card containing the information for a teenage runaway shelter. The plan was to make it to Darcy's, and then Darcy would get her to the shelter.
Wow.
I feel like I get a little glimpse into Cassie's life every time, and I want more, definitely. So y'all, we talked a bit about narrative arc, we talked about sensory detail, we talked about the setting, character development. What kinds of things are you noticing in Sarah's writing?
Oh, can I just make a comment about like the smell of coffee and cigarettes? I thought that was so you're kind of scaring me. You're like, is she dead? Is she bleeding? What's happening? And I'm like, oh gee. And then you're like, oh no, it smells like coffee and cigarettes. And that's safe. That's a safe smell. And I was like, okay, I personally wouldn't think of that as a safe smell, but to Cassie, that's a safe smell. So that's kind of cool how you did that. And I was like, oh, okay, we're safe. Coffee and cigarettes, we're good to go.
Thank you.
Relief.
Yeah, I love that because most of us would turn up our nose to the smell of coffee and cigarettes.
Right.
And so Sarah's turned on the head for us as readers what safety smells like.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Anyone else? What do you know about Cassie as a character, except for the fact that I gave away that she's ends up in the foster syndrome system? What do you learn about her in this scene that Sarah gave us?
That she takes charge of her own life. I think that's what I got from that small excerpt. It sounds like she's not the kind of person who just lets things happen to her. She will always do something about it.
Nice. Kay, you were going to add something.
Yeah. Well, I think that she's speaking up. She's rebelling. It sounds like maybe I don't know if this is the first time she's rebelling, but she's definitely rebelling. And I really liked the first line. That makes me want to know a little bit more context that obviously we don't have time for, but that first line about something about love for God, is that if that's what that's like. And I love that kind of, I don't know, that kind of conflict from within, that she's wondering, what is love? And you're not showing it to me. This is not the way it's supposed to be. I don't want it like this. And so that draws me in. I mean, immediately I'm like, okay, I want to know what she's thinking or what she's already been told. So I liked that one.
Yeah,
Me
that's
too.
a great hook, right? So we're hooked. We want to know. And in fact, what would be disappointing if this was the whole writing is that it doesn't in some way readdress this question of, if God's love is anything like yours, then I don't want it, right? And that's a huge hooking statement. And if this was flash fiction, again, because we have a flash journal, right? And Birchbark editing, I think this could easily be a flash fiction if she could bring it around a little bit more and surprise us. Like maybe she finds out fictionally, maybe she finds out she wants God's love, but she doesn't expect that because love has been nothing but pain for her, right? So in all writing, you usually want there to be some kind of shift or surprise that happens. And so by the end of anything that's complete, your main character needs to have come to some new understanding of the world, or if they can't, if they're too broken to come to a new understanding of the world, at least the readers or audience should have come to some new way of seeing the world or understanding the world differently. Or so in flash fiction, that'll happen in like say 300 or 1,000 words. And then across a novel, you have a lot more space to make that happen. But in the end, there has to be a big change, some kind of shift. You may even surprise us, by that at the end. Nicely done, Sarah. You keep giving you teasers about Cassie. So we have Linda, Kay, and Joan. Does anybody want to read what you got? Again, no pressure.
I'll read.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And definitely read with volume because you're a little soft.
Okay.
You don't have, it's your mic by your chin is what's bringing you sound.
This isn't the mic. Okay. Well, anyway. Okay, here we go. I knew it was coming. She was 93 and had lived a good life. This was to be expected. Death happens. Being very practical and matter of fact about it, I accompanied her to the hospice ward of the hospital. The nurses gently washed her, clothed her, and laid her in the soft and warm bed. But in the middle of the night, when the nurse said, "She's dying," I wasn't ready. Wait, not yet. Let's rewind. Her last breath, so final. It's only then that the tears erupted. How can she be gone? Who will listen to me without judgment? Who will always be there for me? The loss was palpable. I was grasping for one more moment, gasping for the air that she breathed out to get closer to her. The expected death left unexpected sorrow.
Nice. Wow.
One thing that I noticed like really fast that you maintained, and I think it adds value, your sentences are very short. And so like that panic feeling, or even if you're gasping for air and thinking, like it's brief. And then I liked the line that you gasped for the air that she breathed out.
Yeah, that was really good because of the character wanting to feel closer to the woman who just died. So she's gasping for her last breath. Oh, that really made me feel it.
Anything else?
I think that that is something that's relatable to probably most of us, because I think that most people would have experienced the death of someone that's close to them at some point in their life. And so it's something that's extremely relatable.
Absolutely. Great observation, Joan, because the whole time that Kay was talking and she did not give us a ton of setting, I was at my grandfather's hospice bedside, right? And that was okay. I mean, that kind of a short little piece like that isn't meant to be set where it's happening decay. It's meant to be set almost in, I mean, to be a bit cliche in our own hearts, right? Because that last breath, I mean, if any of you have witnessed it, it's just, it's something you can't take back and you want it back so bad. And she describes all that with words. And yes, I agree with everybody. Your best line is the gasping for the breath that she breathed out. And it's because you want more of her. And it's both mildly repulsive in the best ways. Because, breathing in somebody else's breath is both awful and a really loving thought and gesture when it comes in this context where we don't know, but we're guessing this is a mother or a sister or some other, because we know that you're a woman author, right? And who else listens without judgment except for our mothers, right? Well,
Right.
mine judges a
Right.
lot, but that's because she's still alive. I would be thinking in her deathbed that thought though. So I thought that was really beautiful, that ritualistic moment you offered us of action where they wash her and dress her, that gave it the ceremony of death. So making the choice to put that in there, when you're going back and looking at your editing, that's a choice that I would keep. I mean, it set us up to be on a deathbed watch in just a few sentences. I mean, I think you're very close to having a complete flash here, with a little bit of editing and attention. You almost have a complete micro story that has happened there with the implications that go all around it. Because, we don't have to know the whole story to know that a very deep and loving relationship comes to an end. That's just heartbreaking. It was wonderfully heartbreaking. Well done.
Thanks.
Could I say something about the first lines?
Mhm.
I liked how kind of like what you were saying in the lines, how it was very matter of fact and practical, the way you started with like, okay, she's old, we knew it was coming, of course she's going to die, because it's like I can't believe that, right? Like I don't believe the character saying that. I can tell that it's not the character explaining how they feel. They're trying to convince themselves not to be heartbroken. They're trying to convince themselves that the information that they're saying, that it should be expected, it shouldn't be this devastating. And I can feel that they don't even have themselves convinced of this. And I like how you did that.
But almost as if, okay, we're going to go in here and it's going to be all right because this is normal, and it's not all right, right? Yeah, very, very great observation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I'm gonna have to go. Sorry, so excuse me. Thank
No
you,
worries.
everybody.
No worries.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Do either of you want to read, Linda or Joan?
Oh,
I
sure.
would prefer to pass. So.
Okay. No
Okay,
problem.
I'll read.
Okay.
And I just want to say that that I think there's a little, it's raw in a sense because it's kind of something I'm still going through, and I think it's important to push back past the my inhibitions, which I'm working on doing. So I said, or what I've written says, I've chosen to push against despair for the last 30 years of my life, even present day. My life has been rife with social injustices throughout that course of time, requiring me to challenge systems through participation in the civic process. These injustices have often been concurrent or continuous, ultimately affecting quality of life. They have sapped me of emotional and even financial resources in decades-long challenges to social injustices. My perseverance only rests in God and a will to survive, still hoping for a better day that I have not yet seen. I do see the rumblings of change beginning to happen. It has also been said that the pen is mightier than the sword, so I've started a new journey as a writer.
Nice. I feel like that really opens up almost like a prologue to what you want to be doing and explaining why you're doing it. Thoughts from the peanut gallery, which I'm part of?
I like how it opened up to hope. Like that's what it felt like to me anyway, unless I misunderstood, but
Like with the
like there's change in, yeah.
I just immediately felt, compassion is the right word. I felt drawn to to be aware of your suffering. Like for you to say, I can't remember what it said, but for you to say something like you've struggled with this for the last 30 years, and that, you know, it makes my heart like, oh, this is not just a bad day. I mean,
Right.
this is something that is constantly with you. And unless I misunderstood, I think you were saying that writing about it is going to be part of the solution. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And you know, I think it requires a level of vulnerability as well. You know, because it's obviously it's emotional. You know, so I think for me, a lot of times the challenge that I've had is when I'm talking about technical issues, it's kind of easy. But when it comes to the emotional issues, sometimes, you know, in my writing, I've encountered a brick wall.
Yeah, I would really love for you to take that wall down
Thank you.
and
I'm
really
doing my best.
let us into your struggle, because that's what your writing will do.
I think that's part of why, and I hate to sound like I'm coming back to class, but trust me, I'm not. I think that's part of why we read like writers, is we witness other people really open up their vulnerability, and it makes you less alone to be vulnerable. And it's hard to be vulnerable, and especially difficult when I hear you say things about social injustices and how it impacts you financially and emotionally. Those are really tough things to open up and say, this is exactly how it did it. But that's the story that will end up being so meaningful to people who've had the similar experiences. And that's where the hope comes in, right? The chance for you to write about this and other people say, oh yeah, me too, right? Not just the Me Too movement, but I mean, the fact that people can relate to what you write. So it feels like you're off to a really good start with that.
Well,
And
thank you. I
and
also want to say, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Okay. I also wanted to say that as far as like writing in short bursts like we're doing right now, I basically do that almost every day. It's not really something I'm choosing to do, but it just happens. The reason is because I'm in communication with a lot of city officials, and I literally am writing emails, probably written hundreds of emails to the city. I usually get like if I get a response, it's like a one-liner. And to be quite honest with you, a lot of times I send that information off pretty much unedited, you know, because it's like, okay, I just need to get this done. And I mean, usually it's with a reason, you know, I mean, I might have missed a comma here or something like that. But most of the time writing it, I'm so upset about the situation. I'm like, I don't even care if the comma is not there. If I missed the comma, y'all can read this. It's at a level that you can read it and understand it, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly writing
Right.
emails. I just wrote some emails today to the city, even though it's Saturday, because that's how much work I put into this.
Right. So one thing I would say as a public affairs officer who gets these emails, back when I was in public affairs with the military, I highly recommend that you keep doing all the editing and careful writing, because people pay more attention to quality writing, and they will, to use the same word, write off people who don't pay attention to commas and stuff. And it's not fair. I'm just telling you that happens because they take it as an indicator that the person's not taking the time to write them, you know, something really.
No, I think they understand that when that happens, if it's happened, which they understand I'm upset at that point.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I've got,
they just
yeah, and I've gotten a lot
attention to it.
Yeah,
so one
yeah.
of the things I really want to encourage for this next round that we're going to do is and we'll try to do it quickly because I don't want to keep you too long. We really do try to hold the 10:30, and we're going to go slightly over. But I really want to push this into even more creativity now. So as you go into this one, if you can struggle with your brain to give you something figurative, and I would recommend like a metaphor or a simile. You know, say something is like something else, or something is something else. And the example you'll hear me using in your grading all the time is it's like a childhood teddy bear. You know, so something was as soft as a childhood teddy bear. And I use this example in teaching because the childhood teddy bear, we all know how soft it is, but also that softness carries more weight than just being soft, because it represents all the things that were positive about childhood. Cassie doesn't have a teddy bear. We all know about that, but I mean, we don't, but I do. But the idea is to pick something, if you can, that isn't just saying something is as, you know, soft as something else or as hard as something else, but that whatever you're comparing it to has even more meaning than just the literal object. And that's to say, when we do these bursts of writing, it's beyond passing on information and going into even a deeper place in your brain that is creative and trying to draw connections that don't just come in everyday speech. And that's the most important thing we can do with these bursts of writing that we're doing here. So the one I want to do now, I will hit it into the chat. I want you to write about, what do you, if you're doing nonfiction, or your characters want to avoid doing at all costs? And then now write how they end up really close to doing or doing that very thing. Meaning that whatever you don't want to have happen for you or your character, come really close to having that happen, or make it happen if it's a fictional character, you know, I mean, or if it happened in your own life, tell us about how it happened, right? And this is a fun thing to do because we are with our fictional characters and even ourselves, we're very protective. We like our character. We don't want anything bad to happen to them. And this is a chance for us to explore those boundaries. Okay, everybody, on your marks, get set, right.
I have to bow out. I have a flu shot appointment.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Nice to see you, Linda.
Sure. Okay, bye.
Bye. 30 seconds left. All right, time's up. Try to come back and see what you got. And as y'all are wrapping up, I want to acknowledge what you wrote, Joan, but definitely we're going to stick to the creative writing content here. It is frustrating. I will say that.
Well, that is part of the creative writing and content here that you'll see in my other prompt. So it's not unrelated, because if I'm not writing about that, then I really don't have much to say. Sorry. I mean,
No,
that's just,
right. I'm just saying
yeah.
that, I really do understand your frustration and would love to hear what you, in fact, if you want to start, you can be the person who starts.
Okay, that's perfect. All right. Let me get back to ours. Okay, so I have the city of New Orleans wants to avoid doing what is right because of their liability in the matter. The only concern the city has is liability or their public image. There are a number of instances where the tax-paying public is beginning to resist and speak out, thus requiring the city to do what they otherwise do not want to do, including a fully funded relocation of residents on a toxic site. Land and homes that the city of New Orleans sold decades ago in the name of affordable housing. This site has one of the highest levels of cancer-related deaths in an area known as Cancer Alley. The city council has allocated $35 million for the relocation of these residents. However, current mayoral administration has hired outside legal counsel that has not agreed to full replacement value, while the money sits in a bank drawing interest for bank, and a recent death just happened of a resident on that toxic site.
Okay, so we know your topic, which is great. I'm wondering, can you emphasize for me, because I was listening for it when I asked you to do a figurative language thing, what was the metaphor in there that you wrote that was your metaphor?
I guess I probably did not put a metaphor in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm pushing for that is in the kind of writing that you're doing, it is being able to express these really important facts in that new kind of language is what makes it come alive for your reader. And there is a metaphor in there because people started calling it Cancer Alley, but it's not yours. And so just
right.
I really want to encourage you to think of the way that you can interpret this, again, critical information that you have. What is it like for your reader? I live we moved to this rural property with horses out the window. I'm not that far. I'm probably 3 hours from Hanford nuclear site, but I'm not near any toxic places. So how do you make it become real for me, somebody who lives in the rural Pacific Northwest? Think of somebody like me who's really uninformed on your topic and try to make it come alive for me by translating it through some kind of metaphor or simile or something. And that's the thing I'm pushing on. You've got this great stuff, and that's what the creative piece of it is going to do for you, is make it really relatable to your audience so that people who aren't in New Orleans will be interested.
Well, thank you for that. I do appreciate it. That does make sense. And I can say that sometimes I think one of the challenges is that it's hard for people to really comprehend because they don't have to live these conditions where they live. I went to a city council meeting and I basically told them this is like a third world country.
Yeah,
the way this is
what
operating.
would be super awesome is take something that the rest of us think is normal in a town, like a beautiful city park or clean drinking water or whatever, and use that for your metaphors. Say our city park is which parking lot has the most weeds growing up in it to make it like grass. Or, I don't know if that's the answer. What I'm saying is give us these images where we have expectations and they're different for you. And I think it'll really become meaningful.
I guess I have one question. How do you do that with something like somebody, say for instance, is dying of cancer. I mean, like the cancer rates are high. So for me, and maybe I'm coming from a social science background on this because I am, then what I see is numbers and graphs and information like facts. Because I mean, I have family members, my own family has a very, very high cancer rate. But I guess when I'm trying to convey this information, then I'm not so much focused on my own experience with my family and cancer as I am trying to convey this whole social problem that exists across this 80-mile range. Now, maybe I could draw from my own family because I've lost cousins in their 20s and 30s, and even now I have a cousin with cancer. And we are in Cancer Alley. So there's that personal story of how that impacts my family, but then there's also, and I'm more of a macro person, so I'm trying to accept the broader issues here.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I can tell you from working in nonfiction a long time is that your personal story is a great avenue to tell the bigger story. So people are very invested in people's personal stories, and you can use your family's experiences and your own experiences to open up the bigger concern very straightforwardly. And I think that would be a way to make people interested. And one of the ways that you can speak to that, for example, my sister is terminally ill with metastatic breast cancer. And for my family, that's a surprise, right? Nobody in our history has it. It's very unusual. In your family, that would not be a surprise, right? So that's a place for you to kind of gain entry into what is normal in your experiences and might not be normal for the rest of us, right? So I'm just encouraging you, you're really good at this macro view, and I love that idea. So how do you take that macro view and go back to your family and say, how is this different from what we assume is normal in the rest of the world? There is no such thing as normal, but if you use the word normal and play around with it, you know, it'll help you find those entries that make your experience relatable, interesting, and different to people who really are having different experiences.
Can I say, I think you're so passionate about this, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
I think you've got a lot on your heart and your mind. I do think that what Professor Fraser said is so important, because I feel like I have learned about so much in the world, social injustices and all kinds of things from stories. Whereas I wouldn't, I mean, to be honest, I'm not the kind of person that's going to sit down and read an art, you know, like an essay with facts and statistics. And, you know, like if I had to, I would. But if I hear a story that tells it, then it makes me want to know more. And I think that's what's happened to me a lot in my life, is that I didn't know how that happened. Oh, I got to research that more. And it makes me, you know, go to my Google and learn more about something. But it's the stories that get me. And so I think that's why this class hopefully is, you know, sort of your launching pad for that, because it is creative writing, which is different. You know, it's a different way to communicate. So, but I appreciate your passion, lemma, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds so important. So we want to make sure that you're able to tell it. History wasn't going to do it for you, we can tell. So we'll make sure you're able to tell a story.
Right. And I appreciate that. I think the thing that I struggle with is my own vulnerability and having to tell that story. It's much easier for me to give y'all facts and figures about Cancer Alley than it is for me to explain my experience in my own family about cancer.
Yeah. And I mean, I got to tell you, my heart squeezes when you say that. I know, I really do understand. This is something I have empathy for, not just sympathy, because it is very difficult to be vulnerable to people. And I just encourage you to look out there to nonfiction writing where people are being vulnerable, and take courage from where it succeeded for other people and got really big stories that matter like yours out there. Goodbye.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Joan. Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to read?
Well, I want to give you background though. So this takes place before Cassie goes to Darcy and Vinny's as a foster kid.
Yeah, and I thought Darcy and Vinny were the good people.
They were.
So then how is she back at her mom's and talking to Darcy and Vinny? Is that way later?
No, actually that takes place before she goes to Darcy and Vinny's as a foster kid as well.
Gotcha. Okay. That was timeline for me, I was saying, how is this happening?
So this part takes place even before the part that I read a few minutes ago.
Okay,
And it goes dark.
great.
The snow had dumped the night before as a tsunami wave hits and removes the shoreline. It wiped out the visibility of the outhouses on the farm. One day not long ago, her mom had told her that she had a blade hidden somewhere on the property and that at the right moment, she intended to grab it and use it on everyone in the house. Cassie didn't want to believe her mom. That was insane. But her mom had told her the devil told her she must do it or he would destroy her. Not understanding the difference between spiritual warfare and mental illness, Cassie really didn't know what to believe. But that morning, into the flood of snow, her mom had disappeared. Panic surged through her as she remembered her mom's eyes almost changing colors when telling the homicidal plan. The other adults in the house had thought they had removed all the blades and weapons to prevent Cassie's mom from harming herself. They didn't know the sinister plan her mom believed must be played out. So the part that was they wanted to avoid doing it at all costs, she didn't want to believe her mom. And then when her mom disappeared, she's like, should I believe my mom?
So she didn't want to believe her mom would do that. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thoughts from anybody else before I jump in?
You're muted, Kay.
Yeah.
Because my dog keeps playing with a squeaky toy.
We understand. I have two stinky ones.
Yes. The thing that the line that you said about she didn't yet understand about the difference between mental illness and
Spiritual warfare.
Spiritual warfare. I think that's where a metaphor might have worked. I don't know. I don't even know how, but somehow if you could put in her mind just something that's confusing so that you're telling the reader that she doesn't understand it because of her youth or whatever. Anyway, I think that would be a better line for some sort of a metaphor thing. And I don't have it right off the top of my head, but instead of just telling your readers that she doesn't understand, you could kind of reveal it in another way, possibly. I think that would be helpful to make the thing more catchy. So, because I'm listening, going, okay, she's in a very conflicting situation. She doesn't know what's going on, and I don't know how old this person is, but
14.
14. There's so much you could use there to kind of make it more, I understand this now because of this metaphor, rather than just saying. Does that make sense?
Well, the prompt started out with, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know.
There you go. Those brains, man,
That's
you have to
true.
get them going.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything, Joe?
Not right now.
Okay, I just didn't want to jump in if you had something to say. I suspect you have a really cool figurative thing going along with the snow that's obscuring everything. That was my first place that I went with that, in that Cassie didn't understand what was happening. Her mother is off in a snowstorm somewhere, and it's related to her misunderstanding or her inability to understand the difference between spiritual warfare and mental illness, right? I agree with Kay that there could possibly be a pretty amazing metaphor going on. Because we would need more information, it's possible you might still need that line, but the line would happen after some sort of metaphorical comparison to help interpret. Sometimes you have to interpret metaphors for readers, and you might have to interpret that one just because it would be a bit of a stretch, but you've got the setting for it for sure. We have this young child who's confused and not wanting to believe, but now whatever is going on with her mother is obscured by this snowstorm because she's out there in it somewhere. And I love just the tidbits of information in the setting. It's a farm. There's a blade. I immediately thought of Sling Blade, right? The scary movie with Billy Bob Thornton in it. Mhm. And how she probably had a scythe or something out there, which is not it, but I mean, the setting opened itself up to rich possibilities because it's a farm. And we don't expect to have the same girl who took coffee and cigarettes as comfort. Well, of course, that can happen on a farm. I wasn't expecting a farm. I was expecting some kind of apartment or, urban setting, because that's a stereotype that a lot of people like me who have had very secure lives will make about the foster system and children, who are having to be removed from a family situation, especially because there's a whole family there that's hiding blades from her. And I'm like, oh, wow. How does Cassie end up in foster care if she's got this depth of family behind her? So there's so much going on, which I love. I mean, unfortunately, when you read, I have a whole story that goes along with it. But I was really compelled beyond the line that Kay mentioned with her eyes changing color when she talked about it. That also says something, or almost changing color, but what Cassie is experiencing is some sort of, I think mental illness can show in eyes, and Cassie doesn't even know quite how to express it. So right now she's like, they almost changed color. Like something was wrong with her eyes. And I think that that's something that you were hinting at as well. So how's my guessing going?
Is this stuff worth nightmares for Cassie later in life?
I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure. But wonderful then, if you're writing this whole book, this scene seems like it would be very helpful to reveal an early phase of when those nightmares start occurring, right? Especially with whatever's coming with this hidden blade and her mother out in the snowstorm. I'm terrified. Thank you. When my students write horror, it's really hard on me. And that's not horror, but it's real life horror. So, well, nicely done, Sarah. Cassie's story is really important. And I'm glad you're still writing it.
Thank you.
It's okay. Did you come up with anything you want to share?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. She passed the platter around the table so that everyone could see the crispy creatures. Tiny legs protruded from each body, wings adhering to the sides, and antennae limply falling from the heads. As the platter passed him, he picked one up, no bigger than his thumb, and took a sniff. He recalled his childhood tasks of emptying his father's ashtrays filled with stubbed out cigarette butts. Everything in him was repulsed, but the shouts came from around the seated guests. In the mouth, in the mouth. This was the moment of decision. Give in to the crowd and win their honor and praise, or put that blasted bug in the trash where it belonged. Praise and honor won, but not without much gagging. The insect was digested along with his dignity.
We're in a foreign country, aren't we?
We are South Africa, and that really happened, but not to me.
I'm sure. Thoughts, people?
Well, was it chocolate covered?
No, it was not.
Oh, why?
The delicacy.
Yeah. Anything you have, Sarah? Other than the urge to vomit?
Yeah. Well, because I didn't understand what was going on until the end. So now I want to go back and read it from the beginning now that I know. Which is cool because then you get readers rereading your stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so we have this the setting is basically the platter and a group of people. Again, we don't know the larger setting. And in this, if it was a flash fiction, we don't need to. And you then used visual to just hit on every repulsion thing that an American eater would have. So I have to assume an American audience. You have crispy creature, wings, antenna, no bigger than his thumb. So darn it, he should be able to do it. But Interesting that it reminded the character of the stubbed out cigarettes. And then as soon as you got into that, I was reminded of Cassie's mom and the coffee and cigarettes. And I was like, well, what does all this smell like? So I felt like we were missing a little bit of sensory detail, which of course you're not going to get in 6 minutes. But if you were to be working on this more, sensory detail about how warm is it? Because everywhere I've been where they eat these things, it is hot and sweaty and sticky and no air conditioning. And then what does it smell like? And then you ran out of time, obviously, but the bug was digested. Nah, man. He either swallowed it and it was sticky on the way down because those bugs are like that. I had to go through survival training. Or he crunched it between his teeth.
Yeah, that would have been good.
We have to know that. And then I wanted to compliment the use of dialogue where you threw it in where as a crowd they're saying in the mouth, and it tells us something about the setting, because then they aren't using proper English. We would be like, eat it. So we know that these people do eat these things. They're on a platter. They're being served. Just most of us don't. And then he said, the character said in his mind, and you did gender and male. So the character said in his mind that the bug was consumed along with his dignity. And that was such a fascinating statement, because all along, the reason that he's consuming the bug is to participate in the culture, which is a respectful thing to do. And yet he felt like he lost his dignity. And that was a huge surprise to me, because in every case where, I have a chapter where as I used to be not an adventurous eater. I am now. And I was in Saudi Arabia and I was 22 years old and I had to eat dolma, and I didn't like dolma because it was grape leaves, and who eats leaves, right? Not nearly as bad as a bug, but all to say I was really proud of myself for making myself eat the food that was put in front of me because it was respectful to my guests. And your person lost his dignity. So that's really surprising. Again, I think you're well on your way to a flash fiction. And if you were to develop it as a flash, I would recommend more of that sensory detail. But
I
but
should
also,
have.
yeah.
Well, I should have somehow made it clear, which I didn't, that it was more about peer pressure.
Yeah. No.
Than trying to be respectful to the guests, to the culture, because it. I mean, in real life, it was more about that. It was more about fitting in, and it was about, the people that he was with weren't necessarily of that culture. They were just
fair
so
enough.
that's if I could develop it, I'd
Yeah.
have to figure out a way to make that clearer.
Yeah, so you have a way ahead for editing this if you want to develop this as flash fiction, or nonfiction. It can't really be nonfiction. I mean, it can be, but you have interiority with him, so it can't really be you.
Yeah.
Anyway, but if you're doing a flash fiction, you could do a little bit more on the peer pressure, especially if this isn't necessarily the culture. Have they even prepared the insects correctly?
Yeah.
Have they just pulled it off the sidewalk and didn't even wash it off? I don't know. I mean, there's more to it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, there could even be the wish that he was in the culture, and then it would at least justify the fact that he ate it. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of things you can do with it, but the dignity at the end is such a nice surprise that I think you would want to play with that teeter between, is he in a third world country place or not? Or do you have a flash fiction where it's not this true event, but where somebody does feel like he lost his dignity when he should be being respectful? That's kind of fun. I mean, that's the most fun about fictionalizing real events, is when something pops up you didn't expect and we misunderstand you, but a new and really interesting story is coming.
I just wanted to say that I'm kind of sitting over here laughing because I'm in Louisiana and we eat foods that other people in the rest of the country kind of have that same feeling about, like crawfish and different things that boudin, a lot of different things that we eat. And so for me, I'm not even seeing it. Maybe we are a third world country here in New Orleans to some extent, but I guess for me, I'm visualizing it from my own experience of being in Louisiana and eating foods that people who come here look at you like, what? Are you eating that?
Yeah, in fact, great point, Joan, because at the beginning of this, I was thinking of those tiny little crabs that get deep fat fried. And that's what I thought was probably going around on the platter, because until we got to the antenna and the fact that it was no bigger than his thumb, I was like, this is an insect. And the whole time I was hoping for a nice deep fat fried soft shell crab. I was trying for
So was he hoping for that?
Right, right. These are great. And I feel like we're off to a really good start on things that you all can do. This pressured writing, Joan, I know you're used to it, but also, and Sarah's become used to it. And Kay, look at
I'm
those
not used to
amazing
it.
little tidbits you got. So this is something you
Yeah,
can
that's
always
great.
do on your own. Find a prompt
Yeah.
and set a timer.
Hmm.
And for Joan, I keep encouraging you to go into the creative side of it. And the other thing is that if you want to write some things with vulnerability, just do it in something that nobody can read. You don't ever have to show it to the rest of us, but it would give you a chance to practice using that voice. So I'm not saying submit it for class or anything. I'm just saying that I encourage you to practice that vulnerable voice, even if you never show it to anybody, because it'll help you give confidence to show it to the world if you want to. And if you don't, that's okay too. You know?
Well, that's good. I mean, I do believe that, for me to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish, that's going to be a necessity for me to open up that vulnerability.
Yeah,
and even for it to, go ahead.
Oh, I really think so too. And I'm sorry, because it's hard.
Yeah,
difficult.
and
I use the word hard all the time. It's difficult. But I really want to encourage you, if you can, to start pushing in that direction.
Right. And even for it to be effective, because in order for other people to look at these issues as real issues, or to see why it's important, or to even begin to address the issues, then there has to be something relatable
Yep.
for them.
It has to be happening to real people, and to make people feel real, you have to write the story, you have to make the characters. And then when people become invested in these characters, they don't want these things to happen to them anymore, and it'll change it. I mean, hopefully that's the goal behind it anyway.
That's the goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything, Sarah? Was it good morning?
Yeah, thank you. This is really, it's
I
helpful.
should say good writing morning. It's not always pleasant, but it seems like you got some good material today. All right. Well, so this was a great start. I usually try to do things. I usually try to do these every 2 weeks if I can. So we wouldn't do it this next Saturday, but we'd try to do it the Saturday after, which is the 17th.
17th.
Yeah. So probably that's when we'll try to do it again. I don't remember anything on my calendar. Usually I project it out ahead. I've just been a little bit kerfuffled, including the 7-hour drive I'm about to go do, whatever. But I'm really excited about this start, and I feel like the term is off to a good start also with everybody in 510. If anybody watches this, your creativity just reminds me why I love to do this. I mean, you all are deep thinkers, and I love that. So thank you for showing up today. We do try to hold it 25 minutes shorter than today, so I promise to try to do that next time, because it's a lot of time for all of us, but I feel like today was great.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. See you all later. Take care.